Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Happy New Year from all of us at Another View. Up next, his name was Lemon. He was a slave, and he was owned by the College of William and Mary. His relationship with the college was complex. We know he sold produce to the college, and even though he was a slave in 1808, he received a Christmas bonus from the institution. The role of the College of William and Mary during slavery and its attitude about race relations from Civil War until today is the mission of the Lemon Project, a journey of reconciliation. It's an opportunity for the college to attempt to rectify wrongs against African Americans and build bridges between the college and the Tidewater community. The Lemon Project is next, right after the news from NPR.
Discussing the issues and celebrating the successes of the African American community. This is Another View.
That's our huge audience out there clapping for us. It's a wonderful thing. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Today, a history lesson on slavery and race relations and how one institution of higher learning is coming to grips with its actions and sometimes inactions towards African Americans. It's called the Lemon Project, a journey of reconciliation, and it's a multifaceted ongoing mission by the College of William and Mary to understand its past, attempt to right wrongs done to African Americans, and build bridges of understanding for today and the future. Here to discuss the Lemon Project is Dr. Robert Engs, consulting history scholar for the Lemon Project. Welcome to the program, Dr. Engs.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you. And Jody Allen, the managing director of the Lemon Project. Hi, Jody. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks.
Good. Dr. Engs, let me start with you. Paint a picture of Lemon and what he was all about.
It's a very vague picture, unfortunately, right now. We only have a few references to Lemon in the records of the faculty. We do know that he was a slave of the College of William and Mary, that he was apparently a favorite. He, as you mentioned, received a Christmas bonus. We also have records of him selling wheat and other grain to the college. We have the record of him becoming ill in the college, providing money for a special diet and a doctor's visit. And then we have, unhappily, the last entry about Lemon, in which the college pays for a coffin for him. So we know that he was a special person to the faculty at the college. We know that he had a more complex relationship than simply a piece of property to the college. He had apparently a life of his own and independent means, so that he was not simply a slave, pure and then simple. It's quite likely that he had a family. Indeed, there are people who claim that many of the Lemons in Gloucester County and York County are part of that same extended family, and that's one of the things we hope to learn more about. But we took Lemon also as a kind of symbol of the long-forgotten and complicated relationship between black and white, slave and free, at the College of William and Mary over the centuries. And it's that relationship in all its aspects that the Board of Visitors charged us to investigate.
Mm-hmm. How did you discover Lemon in the first place? I mean, was someone just going through records, or how did that come about?
It was the hard work of graduate students who were working on their thesis, especially one woman who was doing institutions in slavery. And what you have to do is sit down with musty, often difficult to read records and piece things together. It's a bit of a detective story kind of thing. And that's how we found him.
Mm-hmm. Jody, this is a pretty bold move for an institution to actually say, you know what, we need to take a look at our past. We need to acknowledge that there were some issues. Mm-hmm. And we need to do something to try to make that better.
Yes, it is. I think, other schools are doing it, but for William and Mary, I believe, in its location, in terms of being a southern school in a small town, I think that we are making new strides in trying to to uncover the history and to right, as you said earlier, to right some of the wrongs that have been done to the African American community, to acknowledge those. I think that's important. If you don't acknowledge them, then you're not giving the people, the citizens, you're not acknowledging that, they were wrong.
No, you're doing fine. The question is, and Dr. Engs, I'll go back to you on this. So you start with Lemon, and you recognize that as an institution, William and Mary owned slaves. Then you start to look further into the history beyond slavery, and there continue to be some issues in terms of race relations. Yes? No?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, in the early period of independence, the College of William and Mary almost went broke, and one of the ways it stayed solvent was selling its slaves. So there aren't that many that we can. This is one of the real problems with our research. We can't find the slaves. We know.
Do we know how many the school owned?
No, we don't.
Oh, okay.
From the records that we have, it's only around a dozen, and we're pretty sure that there were more slaves than that there, which means that in a kind of projection to the present, that apparently what William and Mary did was outsource slavery, that it hired a steward who provided the meals and kept the buildings and so on, and that the steward owned the slaves. And so we think we may have found him, and he does have about a dozen slaves who are the right ages to have been working at the college, but we haven't gotten any further yet. There's still a lot of work to be done there. Then once the war comes and slavery is ended in Virginia, there is a long and unhappy history of awkward relationships between the college and the African American community, with the freed blacks, of course, being excluded as students. But then for a long period, William and Mary was actually closed from the end of the war until the 1880s, with only the Jody, I think, knows more about this, the black steward of the college ringing the bell once a year to say that the college was open when, in fact, there were no students. Then when the college reopened in the 1880s, of course, black students were not admitted, and there's a long history between that and ultimate integration in the late 1960s, early 70s of poor treatment of black employees, which unhappily continues to some degree even to this day. So it's not just slavery the college has to make up for, and it is aware of. It also realizes that it did wrong during the age of Jim Crow as well, and it's those things it also wants to mitigate and recognize.
As a matter of fact, Jody, during Jim Crow, the college actually did not take a stand against Jim Crow. Is that correct?
That's correct. The college and if blacks were not working at the college, they didn't even walk across campus. And working at the college meant in the very typical, what they would consider Negro jobs at that point. They were the janitor, the cooks, what have you. There was one gentleman who went to work at the college as a young man in 1888, and he was at the college until 1955. So for 67 years, he worked there, but he went initially as a cook, as a server, and then he became eventually a janitor, and then a head janitor, and then he was a bell ringer. Because at that point, early on, that's how they acknowledged the changing of classes or some special gatherings on campus, and so he was the bell ringer, and his name was Henry Billups. And at this point, actually, recently, the last 2 spring semesters, I've taught a class on Jim Crow in Williamsburg, and Jim Crow in general, and then in Williamsburg, and kind of looking at Mr. Billups' life as a lens to look at and gauge what Jim Crow was like, kind of through through him and his actions and activities. And he was seen on the campus by some as, I think some people may have genuinely respected him and looked to him, but others, he was also jokingly referred to as the doctor of boozology. And that was, part of that came from, he could, even during Prohibition, he could find
the booze
and
get it on campus
for students and faculty. He also was kind of a protector of his boys, as he would sometimes refer, because the school was then early on was all male, and he would, if he knew the dean was coming to raid a card game, he would let them know. If they got off campus and got into trouble, he would go and get them.
So he really was a protector.
He was a protector, but within the black community, he was a very well respected and looked up to individual. And so he kind of led these two lives, one, on campus as this doctor of boozology, but within his community, he was very well respected.
You think he was well respected also because he had access to the college when no one else did?
I think that was part of it. I think even though he was, the janitor and the bell ringer, having a job at the college meant something at that point.
Dr. Engs, let me go back to slavery for just 1 second, because I'm trying to understand what a college uses slaves for. What were their jobs? What were they weren't working the fields of William and Mary or anything like that, right?
Well, there is a real irony here that before the Revolution, the college received a grant of land called the Nottoway District, which I guess is over in Isle of Wight.
Okay.
And it was a piece of property that William and Mary slaves farmed to raise money for scholarships for poor but worthy white boys, who then used this money to go to the College of William and Mary.
So the goods that they got from that piece of land, they used for scholarships for white boys to go to school.
That's correct. In addition, the normal kinds of things that house servants did in the antebellum period were things that they did. They cleaned the rooms, they started the fires, they cooked the food, on and on. They worked for the professors. One of the other sources of slaves at the college apparently was students who brought their servants with them. And the problem is that they're very hard to track down too. But we do have a record of the college imposing a fee on students who brought their own servants with them. Now we can't find the records of who paid the fee and how much and so on. So it's often very frustrating to run into dead ends. In addition, the slaves and the subject of slavery were subjects of research and reflection by the faculty. And in fact, one of the chief defenders of slavery and the creator of much of the pro-slavery argument that the South used before the Civil War was Thomas Roderick Dew, who was a professor of history and then for a brief period president of the College of William and Mary. So that William and Mary is responsible in more than just having transgressed. It in fact was an ideological leader in the advocacy of slavery. So even though they didn't have many slaves, they didn't own many slaves, they were certainly a major force in the debate over slavery before the war.
The slaves that worked in Isle of Wight and so forth, do they have family? Or have you been able to find any records of descendants from this area that may have been there?
We're still working on that. We think we've actually found the tract. And there's some names out there that may be related to the period that the college owned. The college sold that land around the time of the Revolution, so it really goes back to the very early days of the college. And it's difficult because the census records, the property records and so on, of James City County were destroyed during the Civil War. So that a lot of the information that we would like to have is simply lost forever. So it's hard to keep track of who these people are. We know who many of the freed families were who lived in Williamsburg, and in some cases worked for the college. There was a combination of free labor and slave labor at the college. But who the slaves were, what became of them, these are things we're only beginning to scratch at, but we're hoping that in the years to come, especially because it's a Civil War sesquicentennial, that we can build a real record of the African American community in Williamsburg and its association with the college.
Mm-hmm. So the college, the faculty, I believe, first kind of came together and said, we need to acknowledge this and we need to do it in a formal way, and that's how the Lemon Project started. What was the attitude on campus to make this happen?
Well, initially, in 2007, it was the student assembly that came together and made the resolution that we needed to look into the history, the full history, the complete history of the college. And then the following year, the faculty assembly did the same. And then they brought in Dr. Engs in fall of 2008 to kind of get a look at what we knew so far. And we did. He found that a lot of information had been gathered in different places by graduate students and undergrads doing some work. And so he gathered that up and then prepared a report. And then so in the spring of 2009, the Board of Visitors decided that they prepared the resolution saying, that we acknowledge that William and Mary did own slaves, and that and it didn't do anything to mitigate Jim Crow, during that Jim Crow period, and that it was going to, do something about it at that point. And the campus has been very positive, I think, very supportive. The students, this is really our second full year. In terms of being out there active, but I actually had spoke to a group of students last week, and the first thing I asked was, of the group, there were about 30, and I asked, how many of them had heard of the Lemon Project, and almost everyone raised their hand, and so we're getting the word out. The word is getting out there, and so far, at least on the campus, everyone seems very positive, and I have students contacting me on a regular basis about research projects and opportunities to get involved, and so I think we're making a difference, but we still have some ways to go in terms of, the entire campus and knowing about it, and the community knowing about it. But I think we've certainly made some strides.
You both touched on the fact that there were some issues in terms of the treatment of African American employees, which also becomes a part of this whole Lemon Project. I'll start with you, Dr. Engs. Can you expand on that a little bit in terms of what was going on and what was that negative treatment?
Well, historically, black employees at the college have been confined to the lowest paying, least desirable jobs. Additionally, there were almost no means for upward mobility in employment. There were symbols of simple disrespect and insult. For example, African American women workers, as they waited for their buses to go home, had to sit at a bus stop that was overshadowed by a flagpole given by the Ku Klux Klan, and very often employees were dismissed before they could receive receive real retirement benefits and so on. So there have been these problems for over a century, and through the help of and leadership of faculty like Cindy Hipanovich and the history department and others, there's been an effort to call attention to the injustices and to improve conditions. For example, there was no way that William and Mary employees could actually take courses at the college so that they could improve their own educational levels. Mm-hmm. And my understanding is that there's some discussion of changing that so that it will be possible for them to actually enhance their own education.
So was this for all the employees, or in other words, no one who was employed by the college could take advantage of furthering their education, or was it just the African American?
No, as I understood it, there are neat ways of making distinctions about who's who that doesn't have to say color. And it was basically hourly employees.
Oh, I see.
So if you were
level.
Staff, that was somewhat different, or if you were faculty, that was somewhat different.
Okay.
But the result was that even after integration, black families in Williamsburg would send their kids anywhere, including the University of Virginia, which to me seems to be a much harsher place, much harsher environment, rather than have them go to William and Mary.
Because of the negative experiences that they had with the college.
With the college. Mm-hmm. And the consequence is that although William and Mary is doing better now in attracting African American students, most of them are from somewhere else. They're not from Williamsburg. They're not really from the peninsula as much.
And Jody, you're from Hampton, so you live in not far from Williamsburg and in that general area. So what is the attitude and the tenure among the black community towards William and Mary?
Okay. Well, just to clarify, I grew up in Hampton, but I actually live north of Richmond now.
Oh, okay.
But I know as a high school senior, thinking about what college I was going to choose, I didn't consider William and Mary, and it wasn't because of a something that happened to me, of a particular incident that happened to me, but the general feeling was that William and Mary was not a welcoming environment for African Americans, and so I opted not even to apply at that juncture in my life. Now, I did years later apply to William and Mary and get in, and that's where I earned my doctorate. But it was still a surprise to many people, in my family, that I would choose to go there. And again, it was more of a cultural memory than like an actual, anyone in my family being harmed. But I think that was kind of how people felt about the college then. And that's something that's true, I think, in a lot of southern towns.
I was going to say, isn't that an issue that takes a long time to overcome, is the cultural belief. Once something, an institution or something is branded as a certain way, it takes a very long time for the community to move beyond that.
I agree. I think we have to show that William and Mary is different now, that William and Mary is a welcoming place. And I think that's going to take, some time. It didn't the people didn't start to believe the school is the way it is. It didn't develop their beliefs overnight, and they're not going to change overnight. But we have to be consistent over a number of years, I believe, showing that, we want you here, you're welcome here. We want you to come on campus to lectures, to see exhibits. We want you to feel good about just taking a walk on the campus, and there's still a lot of people older people in particular, who feel that's, it's just not the place for them. It's better to just stay away. But I think through the Lemon Project, we're really working to change that. And last spring, we had our first spring symposium that involved faculty, students, staff, and community members. And we actually held it at the Bruton Heights School, which is the historically black public school, high school. Well, it was K-12. Okay. And so we held it there, and people really seemed to appreciate that, that we acknowledged that this is a significant institution in their community, and that we held this symposium there, and we had panels that involved community members, faculty, and students. And they asked, we talked about, how did we get to this place where we need to have a lemon project? And then where do we go from here? Mm-hmm. What's the next move? And then in between that, students were able to present papers that they had written there was a class called Slavery in History and Memory. And so some of the students from that class were able to present their papers. Mm-hmm. And so in the we got very good feedback from the community. Later in the spring, we also were approached by a community member to bring in John.
Can't remember his last name.
I cannot
okay.
remember his last name, but he's the president of the National Black Farmers Association, John Boyd.
Yes, John Boyd. Yes,
and he was on campus, and that was something we co-sponsored with the community, and we got a very good turnout.
As a matter of fact, I was there.
Okay,
yes,
great.
I came to that.
Great,
yes. And it was a great turnout.
And so I think as we continue to show that we're willing to work with the community, and that we care what they think. I think little by little, but I think it makes sense that they're still some people are still kind of waiting to see, mm-hmm. William and Mary has said they're going to do this. Are they really going to do it? And so we're planning another spring symposium for this coming March 24th.
And you brought up a point that I was going to ask you both about, too, and that is, you doing symposiums, you allow people to come in and sit for that moment and time. But what else is happening on campus in terms of employment, in terms of recruitment of African American students, in terms of very real concrete things, so that if I'm a person who lives in Williamsburg and I remember back when, because it happened to me, that I can actually say, wow, this institution has really turned around. So are those things happening in tandem with what the Lemon Project is trying to do?
We're doing more, I think, to team up with, hopefully, with admissions, with alumni, the alumni affairs, with student organizations, to work with them to get some of those things done. And we've only been doing this for a year, mm-hmm. and so. But we are. I guess
what I'm asking though is beyond the Lemon Project. Mm-hmm. I mean, if the faculty and the Senate and the Board of Visitors mm-hmm. felt strongly enough to say we need to do a very special thing to bring attention to this issue, is at that level, are they looking at other ways to rectify things? By bringing in more African American students, for example, or making hiring rights, better in terms of the way that employees are treated, and hiring, African American faculty and raising the levels. Are they doing those kinds of things too? Because I don't expect the Lemon Project to do that, but I'm just saying the university itself or the college
that's
itself.
One of the things that I discovered when I was brought down to look at what was actually going on already was mm-hmm. that there are any number of things, initiatives being taken by different offices, some of whom didn't even know each other existed. That's one of the problems, I guess, at all institutions, but also at William and Mary, that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And hopefully one of the contributions of the Lemon Project will be to get people to talk to each other so that they'll know what they're doing. But, for example, there's something called the Gateway Project, which is run by the admissions office, that encourages or provides scholarships for students with economic need and minority backgrounds. It's tied more to economics than it is to race, but mm-hmm. obviously what we're after is to identify and attract more African American students to the college. There has been an active effort, and Jody knows a little bit more about this than I, to get black alumni more involved in the life of the college and life of the students. Often William and Mary students who are very, very bright still feel very alone when they come to that campus, and interacting with alumni who made it through and are doing quite well themselves is a very positive force. Mm-hmm. Likewise, we have an ongoing oral history project that seeks out people from the community, and we have a library of their remembrances, which they can use as well as we use for research. That we're building a permanent record history of the African American community as it's in their words, in their voice, for the future. Mm-hmm. There continues to be an active group of students, both black and white, agitating vigorously for a living wage, as their slogan at the college. The Lemon Project isn't directly involved in that, but last year, for example, at Symposium, we provided time for them to state their case and what they were trying to do. We continue to work with student organizations, and Jody's especially provided leadership in this area, like the Student NAACP and other organizations who are interested in reaching out beyond the walls of the college to the community. So there's a lot going on. It would be ideal if people communicated more what they were doing. Mm-hmm. But quite frankly, as an outsider, I've been impressed by the amount of activity going on.
Jody, do you talk about the student NAACP, for example, because I know that the Williamsburg, James City County, York County, I think it's all together, NAACP is very active in that area in terms of making sure that people are informed about issues that are going on and take action. So how does the student group mesh with that?
Well, the student group is very interested. I've met several times with both of their the co-presidents of that group, and they actually invited me to participate. Like I said last week when I spoke, the group I spoke to was gathered by the NAACP and the Student Assembly, and the NAACP sponsors every semester what they call core programs, the mm-hmm. conversations on racial equality. And so they invited me to come in and talk about the Lemon Project. And then they opened it up for a discussion, kind of asking students, how they felt, now in 2011 as students at William and Mary. And we're hoping to get a focus groups out of that group to come and meet with us at least 2 or 3 times this semester to talk about, as current students, what their needs are, what their interests are, how they're feeling as students of color at William and Mary, and what we can do to make it a more welcoming, comforting environment. Mm-hmm. And so, and the plan is that out of that, they will come up with an action plan that they will be able to present at the spring symposium, and hopefully there will be things that we can actually put into action for the following school year, the 2012-13 school year. Mm-hmm. And so, and the leadership of the student NAACP is very interested in seeing that and carrying that through, mm-hmm. And being very. We had about, I think, 35 to 40 students, and they want more, and they said we can get more, and that was very exciting, very exciting. We might have to use food, but that's okay.
Feed them and they will come. But to get, to find out, what their concerns are and what their issues are and how William and Mary can respond to those is very important. Mm-hmm. Dr. Engs, from a historical perspective, as you look at today's Williamsburg and how it is still today's African American Williamsburg, to be specific, and how it is trying to rectify or to come to grips with what happened to it in terms of William and Mary and being able to move forward. Do you think that the community is working towards that now, or is the prevailing attitude still, I'm not going to have anything to do with this?
Well, it's an interesting kind of situation because there's a third gorilla in the room, or a second gorilla in the room, okay. Along with William and Mary. It's also the Colonial Williamsburg. And the African-American community has had some bad as well as good encounters with both of those entities. Mm-hmm. And one of the consequences of those two things existing in Williamsburg, along with the plethora of military bases and so on, has been the influx of people over the 30 or 40 years that I've been familiar with this area. And a consequence of that is a kind of bifurcated community of color. And I can't remember exactly the terms that they use. There's the bin heres.
The come heres.
And the bin heres.
Yeah, or something to that effect. Yes, I've heard that.
And their attitudes towards things like the college are quite different. Those who are more recent immigrants don't have that burden of cultural memory. And so they sort of approach the college as they would any other institution. They send their kids there. They join affiliated groups, just like they join the big churches and so on. And then there's another group about the same size now as time changes, who've been here for generations, and who are even at this point not as prosperous as these newcomers. And they're the ones who are still being hurt by some of the unfair policies that have been implemented by both William and Mary and CW over the years, and are less adept at trying to force change because they have fewer resources. So one of the ideal things that can come out of the Lemon Project is, as we get not only different institutions in the community talking to each other, but perhaps get members of the community talking to each other in ways that they can strategize more successfully. Certainly this is William and Mary and Williamsburg are far better places, I think, for African Americans to live than it was 40 years ago. On the other hand, it's far from perfect, including the problem of it's become such a bedroom community and such a prosperous community that many people who work there can't live there anymore. They can't afford to live there. So how do we respond to these questions? And I think that's something that the college ought to take leadership through the Lemon Project, but through other things, which I think President Riverly is doing, to improve life for everyone in the city. It's a work in progress. We've got a long way to go.
So is the Lemon Project working with Colonial Williamsburg? Because that is very, very much a part of the whole issue in terms of the Williamsburg African American community, because people worked or didn't work at either location.
Well, the mayor of Williamsburg is actually a faculty member at the College of William and Mary. The faculty at the college work closely with the staff of Colonial Williamsburg on many projects. On the issues of social change, I think not so much at this point. But, for example, the old Bruton Heights School is owned by Colonial Williamsburg, and they made it available to us for our first symposium. And we hope to have other projects in cooperation with Colonial Williamsburg, including some archaeological enterprises. We now believe that we may have found, this is through the work of Terry Meyer in the English department, who's one of the co-chairs of the Lemon Project, an African-American school that is called the Brace School.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we're going to talk a little bit about that later on in the show, but go ahead.
Well, I'll
No, go ahead.
But so we're working together with Colonial Williamsburg about how that project can be moved forward.
So, Jody, have you gotten any reaction from the Caucasian community in terms of the Lemon Project? Has anybody said to you, why are you doing this? Why are you dredging up these old... Because you hear that a lot.
Right.
I mean, as you look at history, you hear some people say, yes, because it makes for greater understanding. And then other people say, why don't y'all just let sleeping dogs lie, leave this thing alone?
Well, I think on campus, the response, from white colleagues and students has been very positive. I have not gotten any direct feedback from the general community. I know, though, that whenever there's something written about the Lemon Project in the newspaper, we get a lot of feedback. And unfortunately, a lot of it is very negative.
What are they saying?
that William and Mary doesn't owe the Black community anything. Sometimes it's very negative in terms of, that basically Blacks were lucky to have been brought here. That it's, the thing, as you just said, why don't you just leave it alone? Just it's not appropriate. It's not. Everything is so much better today. Why are you bringing it up, kind of thing? And I think partially now, because of the internet, you can give that kind of feedback anonymously. And so we have a lot of people who are responding out of anger and frustration, I guess, with what they think we're trying to do. There was last February, we went down to Emory University for a conference on slavery in the university. And so all of the schools that are either working on projects similar to Lemon or thinking about initiating projects were there. So it was a wonderful conference. And then later in the spring, we were invited to comment on an article that CNN.com did. And so there was nothing in that article about reparations or anything, but the comments to that article were, directly related to, there's no money is owed. Someone else did this. We had nothing to do with this.
So they tied it immediately to reparations.
They tied it to reparations.
When what we're talking about is building relationships.
Right. And so, but that's the kind of, that kind of anonymous feedback. We haven't had anyone who's actually, well, at least I can't say that anyone has actually come up to us or, schedule a meeting to talk about it face to face. It's been more of an anonymous feedback.
So, Dr. Engs, let's answer the question. Why do we raise this? Why is it important for us to understand the history and what happened so that we can move forward?
Well, one of the things I've learned over the past 3.5 years of looking at this is the depths of misunderstanding and suspicion that still remain. We mentioned earlier when we were chatting that I'd come down here from Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvanians, at least in the Philadelphia area, have
I like how you clarified that.
have a bad habit of being blunt and telling you what they think. And so I was taken aback at how hard it was to discover how people really felt here. The veneer of politeness and civility can be very misleading. There are a lot of angry people. And one of the things that I really had not sensed was how angry the Black community was at William and Mary and at Colonial Williamsburg. But that, as Jody has pointed out, we're discovering that there are a lot of people who never got over the civil rights movement, that runned Virginia and runned Williamsburg. And because it's so politically incorrect, they don't say it straightforwardly, but they drag their feet. Terry Myers sometimes jokes that making change at the college and in Williamsburg is like wading through molasses. So we can't solve old resentments unless we get them out in the open, and that's one thing. But whether we're talking about blacks or about whites, and it's important not just for the community, but it's important at the college itself that there are, William and Mary is a state school, and it's required to take, I believe it's 70% of its students from Virginia, and a lot of those students who are Caucasian are resentful that, say, their brother or sister didn't get in because they reason spaces have been set aside for African Americans or things like that. So there needs to be a dialogue within the college as well as outside, and we need to provide forums in which people can talk about these feelings and resentments rather than continuing to allow them to fester. And I think some marvelous things can come from open and frank discussion, and you can create new institutions and new means of doing things that, when we can't really trust each other, we're not prepared to attempt. So I think that's the reason that we do this. It's not just a
open up old wounds.
Yeah, it's not just an exercise. It's it has a forward projection that we want to reach out to.
Jody, we only have a couple minutes left. What do you want people to understand or do in terms of the Lemon Project at this point? Where are you going with this?
Okay. I guess one of the biggest things I want people to understand is that we're not just looking at the history of slavery in the college, that we are moving it forward, that we're also looking at, as we've said, Jim Crow and the impact of Jim Crow, and that we're looking at today, and that we're not, as Bob was just saying, we're not trying to just dig up for the sake of opening up wounds, but you can't begin to heal if you don't acknowledge those wounds, because even if people don't talk about it, eventually it's going to come to a head. Mm-hmm. And so not talking about it has not made it go away for all these years. So we have to talk about it. We have to talk about it honestly. And I think the Lemon Project is a good place to start those conversations. And that I want people to know, even those people who are writing in anonymously, it's okay to come and say that, let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation. I'll listen to you, we'll listen to you, and you listen to us, hopefully. And then I don't think it can help but begin to heal if everybody is talking. Don't be a proper Virginian. Come forward and tell us what you think in a way that we can respond to.
Okay. Jody Allen, she's the managing director of the Lemon Project. Jody, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. And Dr. Engs, we got about 10 seconds. You want to have one last thing to say?
Look forward to increasing publications about what happened at William & Mary and in Williamsburg over the next 5 years.
Okay. Dr. Robert Engs, he is the consulting history scholar also for the Lemon Project. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll be right back.
Carry me home. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home. A band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. If you get there before I do, coming for to carry me home. Tell all my friends I'm coming too, coming for to carry me home.
And welcome back. The College of William & Mary is known for all kinds of history. It's home to the Wren Building, the oldest college building in America. It's the school that educated George Washington. And now it's believed to be the home to Virginia's first school for free and enslaved blacks. Our Lisa Godley takes us to the building on campus believed to be the Bray School.
Everything you see between the downspout on the left and the first vertical line on the right would have been the 18th century cottage. Everything else to the left and to the right are appendages that were added probably in the early 20th century.
William & Mary Chancellor Professor of English Terry Myers began researching the idea that the building was the Bray School after learning that an 18th century building had been moved onto the campus in modern times. Myers says he's not 100% certain it's the Bray School, but odds are it is.
And along the way, I discovered that there was a possible link to the Bray School, and I especially discovered that the college had actually owned two slave children, Adam and Fanny, that it sent to the school.
The Bray School was set up on a recommendation by Benjamin Franklin and operated from 1760 to 1774. Myers says very little of the original school is visible. Architectural historians believe this window, a small door in the center of the house, and this banister are the only original pieces of the structure that you can actually see.
Apparently, it must have been sturdy. It's obviously lasted a long time, and in all the renovations of the house, all the different uses this house has been put to, it's been strong enough that apparently no one felt the need to tear it out and replace it. So it's nice to have that as something that you can see on the inside, at least. Almost everything else is hidden.
Colonel Lafayette Jones, Jr. is very familiar with the Bray School. 3 of his great-great-great-great-grandaunts were free blacks who attended the school.
There were three young ladies. Was Daisy, Mary, and Eliza. And they were about 5 or 6 years old at that time.
The concept behind the Bray School was to teach religious education to both free and enslaved blacks. Colonel Jones has archived much of his family's history in his book, My Great-Great-Grandfather's Journey. In it, he discusses why the education of blacks was frowned upon.
Southern whites generally believed that the education of free blacks would ultimately lead to them becoming discontented and developing ideas about virtually breaking the slave laws in an attempt to overthrow slavery. All of the southern states established laws prohibiting the education of free blacks. However, a surprisingly large number of them learned at least the fundamentals in spite of the barriers established by the white community. My grandfather said that some of the children who had attended the Bray School were able to read and write and were referred to by many as the first black teachers in Virginia.
For Colonel Jones, being able to lean on the banister that his ancestors may have once used is a great feeling.
Because I feel as if I'm a part of that, as if I'm in the Bray School and actually talking to someone about it. And it really makes me feel good, just to feel the surroundings and the reverberations that come from the walls. And I can just feel it inside my body. It causes me to tremble a little bit.
As for Terry Myers, he's hopeful the building will one day be restored to its 18th century appearance and used as a display area.
And I think there's an honest attempt on the part of the college to move in this direction of reconciling itself with members of the black community with whom it's had not very good relations for centuries. And I'd like to see the school function in a sense to document that past and help us overcome it.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
Lots of history, lots of opportunities to look back and look forward and to make progress in the College of William and Mary and the overall Williamsburg community. We so appreciate you being with us this hour. Please visit our website, anotherviewradio.org. There you can listen to podcasts of previous programs. You can send us a note and tell us how we're doing, or you can sign up for our electronic newsletter. That's a once-a-week reminder about our upcoming shows. And you can also find out about events of special interest to the African American community on our events page. So go on over to anotherviewradio.org. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. I hope you all have a fabulous weekend. I thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next Friday for Another View.